Hey everyone, Rascal here.
And Mama, welcome to our podcast.
Today we're covering the sequel to Avatar, The Last Airbender, The Legend of Korra.
It takes place 10 years after the original series, and the sequel focuses on the next Avatar, Korra from the Southern Water Tribe. In order to learn airbending and completing her Avatar training, she heads to Republic City, where she also must stop a secret uprising of non-benders.
And before we start, be sure to like, subscribe, and click notification bell to get updates on future podcasts and World of Paws videos.
Absolutely. And finally, our Avatar The Last Airbender podcast and live action movie roast.
Yes. Now, we know for this show, both Last Airbender, our garbage movie, and the animated Last Airbender series and Legend of Korra added to Netflix all the same year in 2020.
Yes, which was fantastic.
Right.
Woo-hoo.
So not only did it was great for people who watched the show when it came on, but also brought in a whole flood of new fans who got to see both series for the first time.
And Avatar set a record for a non-Netflix original series, staying in the top 10. I think it was at number 1 for 6 weeks in a row.
Woo! Yes! Woo! That's just awesome. So, seeing how successful that was, and given that Nickelodeon has a contract with Netflix, they decided to add in the Legend of Korra series onto the show about a few months later.
Now, this made us very happy. We have to give you full disclosure. We own both series. We bought them many years ago while the shows were still popular. But it still gives us joy that we can just turn on Netflix and watch it when we want, and we don't have to pull out the DVDs.
Yes.
But if you don't own them, we still think you should buy them, because they are absolutely something you'll want to keep, because they are parts of animation history that definitely won't be repeated again.
Right. And now here was the thing when we heard about Legend of Korra being added and Last Airbender, before we get into the show, because we know that there are a lot of people divided on which show is better. Really, we know Avatar, you can't replace Avatar.
Absolutely.
And Legend of Korra wasn't trying to replace Avatar. It was just supposed to be a follow-up. It was supposed to be a mini-series, and then they started, hey, make it into a whole thing. And that's how it ended up being 4 seasons. And the unfortunate thing that happened later after the announcement of Korra being added to Netflix were some people who were not satisfied with how Korra ended, and it ended up being sort of like a deja vu of season 8 of Voltron. They did not want to see it added to Netflix, and they just only wanted the Last Airbender show. But we didn't see why was there such an upset over not liking Legend of Korra. We didn't know there were that many people upset over, they didn't like Legend of Korra, which we didn't understand. There were some things that we did think they could have done better or written differently, but we knew that there were certain constraints, but we didn't see what was the fuss over it.
For me, Avatar, The Last Airbender is a class by itself. It's one of the best animated series ever made. Whether it's animation, anime, whatever category you want to put it in, there's nothing like it. Legend of Korra, as you mentioned, was the follow-up. We knew it wasn't going to be like it. We were hoping Aang was going to be in it. He wasn't, except for flashbacks, which was our biggest disappointment, finding that in this sequel series he'd passed on. For me, that was the biggest disappointment. As far as the writers choosing to focus on Korra and presenting her life in the way they did, that's the writer's prerogative. Either you watch it or you don't. We were a little stunned in the beginning, but after a few episodes, we were into it.
Right.
And we love it. It's not Avatar, but it's not supposed to be Avatar.
Right.
You're supposed to love Legend of Korra for what it is. It's still fantastic as far as the animation.
Right.
Storyline, having quite a lot of strong female characters.
Right.
As well as strong male characters that didn't step on the female characters. It had values, morals, lessons. It had Steven Yeun.
Right.
It's fantastic. So if you've never seen this series, before we begin, I want to let you know, go into it with an open mind, no preconceived notions, and don't listen to the people telling you what you should and shouldn't think. We think you should just give it a chance yourself, come to your own conclusion, and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Right.
That being said, here we go with Legend of Korra. I almost said Avatar: The Last Airbender.
What? Wrong show.
Yes, Legend of Korra. Outstanding cast on this show as well. Janet Varney as Korra, Jeff Bennett as the radio broadcaster.
Oh, you hear us
but
the
he's
recapping.
hilarious. But he's he's hilarious, and the way he sounds is just it's entertaining.
Right, you love hearing him every recap. We have D. Bradley Baker as Naga, and among other animals. PJ Byrne as Bolin.
And David Faustino is Mako. For you, those of you who like me, who you watched Married with Children, it's amazing to hear him voice his character because you don't realize it's him, and then you see his name and you're like, what in the heck? That's him? That's Bud?
Right.
And then they've got Bud drawn with one of the most handsome characters in the series, and the voice matches, so it's actually fun to hear him voice his character and to hear him actually having more work in Hollywood because he did it for a while. You got J.K. Simmons, who we love as Tenzin.
Yes.
He even
looks like J.K. Simmons.
And he's another character that's one of those characters you love and you love forever after you learn of this character's existence.
Right.
And every time you see J.K. Simmons in anything, J.K. Simmons, we love you, but all we ever call you is, it's Tenzin! It's Tenzin!
Yes.
It's Tenzin, even for the commercials for
State Farm, yeah.
It's Tenzin!
Yes. It's hilarious. And
we have Saishel Gabriel as Asami Sato, and the character looks so much like her. She's beautiful.
Yes. And Mindy Sterling, you know from being the mean teacher on iCarly, she's Lin Bei Fong.
One of the most badass female characters ever created in animation.
Well, it goes to show since she's the daughter of Tom.
Like daughter.
Yeah, she was the daughter of Tom, so of course.
And then you had just a whole cast of people. But these are the main ones that we wanted to
They have having some pretty big stars playing the villains when they got to later scenes, like when they had for Varric and Zahir and stuff. We end up seeing these people doing biopics or documentaries and stuff, and it was really interesting hearing, watching the show and hearing these people give you information.
Now this series, not only does it take place 10 years after the original Avatar series in our time, but in the chronological time of the series, it's way after Avatar,
The Last Airbender.
Well, Avatar Aang's, I don't want to say reign, but Avatar Aang's being the Avatar, that's just the best way to put it. And of course, one Avatar can't appear until the other one passes away, unfortunately. So that should have been our first clue that he wasn't in the series. But somehow in our happy minds of wanting to see Aang and Katara and Team Avatar, we silly thought that he would be in here, but he couldn't be, or there would be no Legend of Korra.
Right.
And it takes place after she's already being deemed the Avatar. They've come to her parents, let her know this is the next Avatar, and we want to take her from training. And you're actually meeting her in the process of her finding whom they decided to teach her, of course, to do airbending, and whom will be better than Tenzin, one of the children of Aang and Katara.
Right. And
who also is a natural airbender.
Right. And they also have a different approach. They tell you from the minute she's on screen as a little kid that I'm the Avatar, you gotta deal with it. And it was funny because there was the joke was that was always a contrast to Aang. Aang didn't want to be the Avatar. He was really calm and shy and happy-go-lucky and stuff. And Korra is really tough as nails. She's abrasive. She's already got 3 of the elements down already.
She's boisterous. She's loud. She's beautiful. She's well-toned and muscled. She's a big girl, but she's beautiful. And this was before we got to what's in now as no body shaming. She was like this years, at least a decade before this came about.
Right.
So it was wonderful that the show's creators and animators chose to have her as a role model because she's beautiful and just, what she stood for after she got her bearings of being the Avatar and learned all her lessons throughout the series. Yeah, you're gonna love Korra.
Right. And you understand when she has the ups and downs, she was still learning. So when her being almost like a vigilante and kicking bad guys because she thought she could just come in and do it, like, this isn't Last Airbender. This isn't where the Fire Nation has everything. You gotta take justice when you can. It was a lot different. So you kind of had to get to this used to the new surrounding.
Right.
You even had the police force, which were all metal benders.
And you had cars, you had all these buildings and Art Deco styles.
It seemed like it was taking place in the 20s. Yeah.
Right. It isn't, but that is, you can definitely tell that's the time period for our time that they were borrowing a lot of the stylings and stylings from
Yeah,
them,
pretty
as far as
much,
clothing
yeah.
and decor.
Yeah, the whole
and so forth.
the setting for
right,
it.
and the vehicles, exactly. And she ends up living with Tenzin's family, and he ends up being her, of course, airbending teacher, and who would be better. And of course she was excited because she knew that Tenzin was Aang's son, but she also was a little trepidatious because she was worried about not making a good impression, not being able to learn well or do well. And in the beginning she had a difficult time because, for those who watch Avatar, whatever the opposite element is the most difficult for an Avatar to learn.
Right, and because air was so easygoing, that was the hardest one for her to learn. And I really loved that when she was with Tenzin, I really like how they had it set up that was her second family.
Yes.
Because there would get to points when she would sneak out. Like, you can't go to this pro bending game thing. You can't sneak out. She sneaks out like it's modern day, and she sneaks out to the game like, I told her not to go. And then, how do you deal with teenagers? It was hilarious. It's like, you act like this is their daughter.
And now that you mentioned that, Tenzin has a beautiful family and a beautiful family dynamic, and there's lots of love. He's got his kids Milo and Janora and Ikki, and his wife Pima, his brother Boomy, and his sister, what's her name?
Hold on, wait, her name? Kaya.
And it's wonderful just seeing the relationships amongst all these characters. And of course, Korra loved being there because there was so much love and drama and excitement and bending going on with all the family members. And yes, it was what she was missing because she was an only child. And she had been away from her mom and dad for a while. So yeah, she was missing that family dynamic that she got with this cavalcade of crazy characters that you love.
And of course, like we said, we mentioned they had her friends who become friends later, Bolin and Mako, who are part of the Fire Fairies.
And
Asami.
So that's the new team Avatar.
Right, which they even say in the show. And of course, they had the new threat for here was Amon, whose leading was called the Equalists, and they were a group of...
In season 1.
Right, they were a group of non-benders who were tired of being oppressed by people who could bend, and they were supposed to cause an uprising and eliminate bending altogether so everyone was equal.
Again, in season 1.
Right.
Because each arc is markedly different. Unlike in Avatar: The Last Airbender, where the entire series was the one villain in the one arc, you had different villains in different books or series. Seasons, I mean.
Right. So Amon was season 1. Varric, who was, not Varric, Unalaq. Unalaq was her uncle for season 2.
And Zahir.
Was season 3 along with the Red Lotus. And then season 4 was Kuvira, who became a huge fan favorite somehow. I was surprised because we weren't able to watch season 4 until way after the show was finished because Nickelodeon did not put up the last episode. They put up online. We couldn't see them at that point. But we could see from Twitter and other sites that Kuvira had a huge following. She had a huge following from fans, and people really loved her character. Then we finally got to meet her in season 4 because she was such a incredibly different villain from not only the ones in just the Legend of Korra series, but just in Avatar in general for being a threat.
And she's such a fan favorite that in Voltron Legendary Defender, where they end up in a different universe, an alternate universe, she ends up being the same type of character that appears. She, along with a couple other characters that were part of her arc in her season, are in the alternate universe episode of Voltron, which was fantastic. As soon as we heard it, we knew who she was, we knew who each character was just by hearing them.
So, as I said, each season has a different focus. Season 1 was about her learning air and defeating Amon. Season 2 goes a little weird because of the animation studio change and different writers. It was supposed to be her going back home to the Southern Water Tribe and learning how to communicate with the spirit world with help of her uncle because Tenzin did not want to teach her because it was so dangerous and violent because the Avatar is supposed to be a bridge between worlds. And unfortunately, Korra was written to be a lot more...
and the human world.
And you even got the backstory of the first Avatar
One, voiced by Steven Yeun,
which was an amazing episode and backstory. And the only downside to that season was that Korra was written differently. She was a lot more aggressive, and not in a way where she didn't take crap from others. She wouldn't listen to others. And it wasn't until the end where she said, okay, I realized that I've been being a jerk. I'm sorry I wasn't listening to you. But it was taking so long. It was becoming she wasn't likable for a amount of time.
What they would call it is headstrong. She was very headstrong. She thought her way was the only right way. And she knew more than the people who had experience in the role she was trying to travel, except for being an avatar.
Right.
But they did have the knowledge of what she needed to know, especially Tenzin.
Right.
And she even rebelled against Tenzin.
Right.
But he stayed loving like a father. And no matter what she did, he was there for her. He supported her when she needed him. And he could be there, he was there, and he worried about her, and he loved her. And again, that was really wonderful.
Right. And season 3? And he had season 3, which was Change. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention. Book 1 is Air, Book 2 is Spirits, Book 3 is Change. And for this one is after the events of season 2, and now the spirits from the spirit world could come into the human world, and people could go in and out as they wanted to. And it seemed like people had like growing pains because spirits were kind of taking over, and they were acting like they owned the place, like they did in the spirit world, and they seemed to really not care about the humans being there first, or the humans would take over the spirit world. It was sort of them getting used to each other, and they were kind of taking advantage. And then they actually had the reemergence of Airbender.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, yes. Oh, yes, we're getting to that.
Okay.
Vaatu, when you talk about Vaatu, yes, he was in season 2 with Unalaq.
Okay.
As the Dark Spirit. For this one, they had the resurgence of Airbenders because she had shifted the balance of both worlds. Airbenders were coming back. New ones weren't being born, but people that weren't benders, period, were becoming airbenders. And it was restarting the Air Nation. And then they went on this journey to find the airbenders and bring back the air nomads, which was difficult because some had become accustomed to how they were living. They didn't want to live like nomads.
Right.
And then the villain, like we said, as you mentioned, Zahir and the Red Lotus.
Who's voiced by Harold Rollins. I know you guys know him because he not only was a musician in a band in the 90s and 2000s, but he's also a dynamic, Henry Rollins for me, a dynamic character. You've known him for playing live action characters, both good guys and villains, and he was just no less fantastic and spectacular as Zahir. I mean, he made Zahir a villain to remember.
Right. And for in here, his goal was to get rid of the Avatar, period. Get rid of the Avatar line because they say anarchy, but he wanted to where there was no rules and everyone was free.
Right.
But to do that, he would get rid of all of the political power, the presidents, the kings, the queens, and the Avatar where would be no ruler whatsoever.
And some really unfortunate things happened to Korra during this arc. We don't want to tell you and spoil if you haven't seen it. And in season 4, which was called Balance, she has to learn to do a lot of things all over again.
Right. And it was sort of a 2-year time skip. And we didn't know what happened to her, and we wondered where did she go. And then we had, of course, with Kuvira coming in, as we said, was the antagonist for the season. We didn't know she was antagonist until a few episodes in, where she had a similar thing. She wanted all the parts of the Earth Kingdom that were belonged to other people. She wanted to put them back together, in her words, to unite everybody, not you all, and to pretty much unite all peoples within our nation.
But she wasn't into truth and love.
No, she was not, unfortunately.
One thing here that was stand out about this season is in season 1 we met Bolin and Mako, and they were brothers who had after their parents died, lived on the street and had learned to fend for themselves and grew up on the streets. And so they were in their teens just like Korra and Asami. In this season, we've learned that they have distance from each other due to the events that happened in book 3.
Right.
And now Mako works with the police whom he didn't trust before. And Bolin has become a moving picture star. And they don't see eye to eye on whom should be in charge, and the political climate they don't agree on. And it was kind of painful at first to see that they didn't get along the way they did in season 1.
Right.
They do reconnect and work out their differences, but you can tell that the rift is there. When this show ends, the rift wasn't totally repaired. And I was unfortunate because you love the relationship between the two brothers in season 1.
Right. And then you get to season 4 with... Oh, I'm sorry. I think season 2.
We were in season 4, and I just went back to season 1 because that's what we were introduced to them, and we learned their closeness. And in season 4, they aren't close anymore. And you were discussing Kuvira.
Yes, and then Kuvira, Bolin starts working with Kuvira because he's thinking he's helping the Earth Kingdom rejoin and help people out. And it turns out she's forcing people into joining her by making them have no other option, or else like starve or risk being hurt or putting villages in danger by not joining her. And you had Mako be the bodyguard of Prince Wu, who was another new character that was added later for the Earth Kingdom. Yeah. And then you had, of course, when the air nomads were finally established, but they had to do it like for the modernized version because they were all different now. And how
we learned more about Lin Beifong's family.
Yes.
She and her sister and their rift.
Right.
Whereas Mako and Bolin were close, Lin and her sister were not.
Right.
And they were not close for various reasons. We learned that Toph is still alive. Got to get that spoiler in there for you. We were so excited.
Right.
Toph is still alive. And you get to see a couple other favorites you know from the first season and some new ones whom you're introduced to. And the way that it wraps up is not the ending that you expect to get, but it is an ending that fits the tone and the writing for the show. You also have to mention that this was one of the shows that was first to show in a limited way a lesbian relationship between two main characters in the final season. Within the last few episodes, the relationship was established in season 4 early on, and it was a surprise. And at the end, they solidified that this was a relationship and that these two characters are a ship and that it is canon. And I think some people weren't happy that it was done the last episode, but I think, again, it had been established early on in the season. But they were one of the first shows to represent and show this type of relationship. And they did it. To us, they did it in a wonderful way. And it was all part of the story. And it all just worked.
And why they did is because they had always planned it, but they didn't know how to put it in because of limitations at the time the show was being made. And they didn't want it to be so focused on the ship that you wouldn't get enough of the story. The story wouldn't feel so rushed or underdeveloped because you were so focused on Korra and Asami. So they put it to where you knew and gave you hints, and then focused mainly on what was happening with Kuvira because the main point was to stop her.
I also want to mention a couple of nice tidbits before we wrap this up. Steve Blum was Amon.
Yes.
Every person who thank you. Every person who voiced a villain in this series was outstanding. I mean, every villain voice actor was spot on and spectacular and unforgettable.
Right.
Every single one. And you don't have that when you have a show that goes on for more than a couple of seasons. Sometimes you're like, well, this villain's corny. Why did you have this good villain and this one was lackluster? But every villain was a threat. Everyone was dynamic. Everyone was voiced spectacularly by every voice actor that portrayed that role.
Right.
And another thing that I want to point out is the animation was, I think, done by Studio Mir
first.
Right. And then there were some changes in the animation during the course of the series. You could tell when the first season and the second season was a dramatic difference. And when you go on Netflix and you see the thumbnail that comes up, Korra's beautiful and gorgeous, and she is beautiful and gorgeous, but don't, guys, get your hopes up because she don't look like that in the series.
Yes, it's artwork. Yeah, this is just promotional art for that season.
And that animation does not look like a picture, but the animation is so good. But the characters do look markedly different from season 2 on. And you can tell that there's not as much clarity or definition in the art, in the animation.
Right. And this happened because, according to the article,
Nickelodeon did not want to pay Studio Mir anymore until much later because they thought the animation was too expensive because it was anime looking. Anime style animation is expensive and Nickelodeon didn't want to pay that. So in the second season and season 3, they hired a Korean studio. And unfortunately that affected how the show, because as you said, it didn't look like high definition. It looked toned down in quality until season 4.
Now, for me, it would have been fine if the Korean studio had started off from the beginning. Then it would have been that way the whole 4.
Right.
Then you wouldn't have noticed the difference. But that studio made the facial features more sharp and a V shape, which is their symbol of beauty. Which is how they see beauty in the face shape. And as we mentioned, it's not as much definition, and it wasn't that their animation was bad, it was just so different in quality, and as you mentioned, it wasn't anime quality, and you could tell the difference in watching it, and it did affect you for a little bit when the shock of seeing the first few episodes. You were just disappointed that they chose not to stay with the Japanese company that did the animation initially.
Yeah.
So if you have not seen Legend of Korra, you should get on Netflix, take your time and enjoy it, and let us know what you think in the comments below. If you got a favorite character, a favorite season, and a favorite villain. If you have seen Legend of Korra and we know you love it, let us know what you think in the comments below. And you just happen to be one of those people who don't care for Legend of Korra, let us know why. Let us know what you think was lacking, what could have been better, and what do you think was the major downfall for you of the series in the comments below as well.
Right. And be sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get updates on future podcasts and World of Paws videos.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for watching. I'm Oscar Entertainment.
And I'm Mama Entertainment.
Have a fantastic day.
Peace.
And reporters sitting flashing lights, trying to walk around, man, who the hell are you? What you wanna do? Well, man, it's on you. Man, it's on you. With her in my dreams, she was my queen. A castle in the mountaintops, rivers and streams. Plucking sunlight from the sky in my pocket, give it to you later on in the